the Lamplight Bistro, where candlelight softened every edge. A woman in powder blue sat alone at a booth set for two. Her lips moved in near silent conversation, addressing the empty chair across the table, as if it held a living soul. Her hand rested beside the untouched plate, a gold band catching the flicker of the candle.
Every year, 2 plates. And she talks to the empty seat like he's still there.
From across the room, Robert watched the second plate grow cold, the ritual as precise as grief itself. He set down his own mug and crossed the floor, his heart hammering with a question he couldn't swallow. She looked up as his shadow fell across the table, her eyes guarded but not unkind.
Excuse me. May I take the empty seat?
That seat belongs to someone.
He stepped back, apology rising, but his mind was already fixed on the mystery she guarded so fiercely. 3 nights later, Robert walked back into the lamplight. The image of that empty booth seared into his thoughts.
The woman with the empty chair. How often does she come?
Linda comes every 15th. Same table, same 2 plates. I shouldn't have said her name. Let her be.
One evening she returned, not in powder blue but charcoal gray, the weariness on her face even deeper. She ordered 2 soups, lit a small candle, and spoke in whispers that trembled across the tablecloth. Carlos placed the soup before her with the care of a man protecting something fragile.
2 plates again, still talking to an empty chair. Why can't I look away?
He stayed until she paid and left, never once glancing his way, a ghost haunting the periphery of a sacred ritual.
Does she ever let anyone sit in that chair?
Number. And if you care, you'll stop asking.
The next morning, Robert walked to the public library, Carlos's warning still stinging, but the pull of the empty chair was stronger.
Linda comes every 15th, same date, year after year. There has to be a reason, locked in the archives.
A faded headline from 10 years ago read, "Rising star chef James Pierce killed in collision. Beloved bistro founder dead at 34. Beside the story, a photo of a young couple beaming in front of the lamplight. The woman's smile, younger, but unmistakably Linda.
Her husband was the founder. The booth, the soup, the untouched plate. It's not just grief. It's a memorial.
Further articles confirmed the bistro never altered its core menu. James's recipes were still served exactly as he'd written them.
The anniversary is in 3 days. I could just be there, not intrude, just witness. But would that be cruel?
He stood at the waterfront for an hour, the cold spray doing nothing to wash away the weight of what he now knew.
She doesn't owe me a story. But maybe a stranger who understands can be less alone. I'll be there, not to speak, just to be.
He turned from the water with a heavy but settled heart. On the anniversary, he would be at the lamplight, silent, observant, ready. On the anniversary, Robert slipped into the lamplight early, finding his usual corner table before the evening rush. Linda arrived in that same powder blue, her heels quiet on the worn floor, her eyes already fixed on the empty booth. She lit a stub of candle from her purse, the tiny flame claiming the table as sacred ground. Carlos appeared with a soup that wasn't on the menu, its steam curling into the quiet like a familiar prayer. Robert raised a hand to Carlos, ordering the same. With a long look, the waiter brought a second bowl to his table.
I still can't sleep on your side of the bed, James. 10 years, and I still set the alarm, just in case.
Her confessions spilled into the air. Grief turned to syllables that only the empty chair could catch.
Don't move. Don't speak. This isn't for you to fix. Just witness.
He stayed until she paid and vanished into the rain, the second plate untouched, the booth once more just wood and linen.
I can't just watch anymore. Next year, she won't eat alone. I'll find a way.
The next morning, Robert opened a notebook and wrote the first honest letter of his life.
Just tell her you've seen her. That the empty chair doesn't make her invisible.
He walked to the lamplight and found Carlos polishing glasses, the letter heavy in his pocket.
Carlos, I know what I'm asking is impossible, but give her this. Please.
If this hurts her, I'll never forgive you. You don't know what that table holds.
2 weeks later, as Linda took her seat, Carlos set the envelope beside her plate. She stared at her name in unfamiliar writing, then slowly tore it open. Dear Linda, my name is Robert. I've watched you honor James from the shadows because I couldn't look away. The letter asked for nothing, only that she know someone saw her, and for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. She looked up, scanning the room, but Robert had stayed away, leaving only his words to reach her. For weeks, Robert avoided the lamplight, uncertain if his letter had done more harm than good. When he finally returned on a quiet Tuesday, he chose a table near the back, as far from the booth as possible. There, by the window, sat Linda, not at her sacred table, but alone with his letter in her hands. She traced the paper lightly, as if the ink had left a scent of something she couldn't name. Then she looked up and found him watching. The air pulled tight between them.
She's reading it again. Don't move. Don't ruin this by speaking.
She didn't turn away. Her eyes held his for 3 breaths before she folded the letter and set it aside. He lifted a hand, not quite a wave, and dropped it again. She nodded, so slight it could have been a trick of light. Carlos appeared with a coffee Robert hadn't ordered, a silent command to stay calm and stay distant. For an hour they shared that charged distance until Linda rose and left without a word, and Robert let her go. That night, as Robert stepped into the cold drizzle, Carlos caught him by the elbow on the empty sidewalk.
She asked about you. After you left that day with the letter, wanted to know your name.
What did you tell her?
That you are the man who's been watching for months, and that no one has ever dared get that close.
Robert's throat tightened. She had seen him, truly seen him, and hadn't run.
She wanted my name, not to push me away, to know. This is more than I hoped.
But if you ever let her think you are just another person who'll leave, I'll make sure you never eat in this town again.
I won't. I swear.
Carlos held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded once and disappeared back into the warm light of the bistro.
Now, I am carrying more than curiosity. I am carrying her trust before she even handed it over. Don't drop it.
A month before the next anniversary, Robert sat down again with pen and paper. This time, he wrote only 3 lines. I'll be at the bar on the 15th. If you ever want company, I'll be there. He mailed it to the bistro, addressed simply to Linda Pierce, and tried not to count the days. Carlos found it in the morning stack, and after a long breath, carried it to the booth on her next visit. He placed the note beside the unused plate with the reverence of setting down a lit candle. Linda unfolded it slowly. She read the lines once, then again, her fingertip pausing over the word company. For the briefest moment, her expression cracked, not in grief, but something dangerously close to hope. Then she folded it compactly and tucked it into the pocket of her dress, as if it were a secret too delicate to speak aloud. On the anniversary evening, Robert settled onto a bar stool with a bowl of the same soup, refusing to stare at the empty booth.
She has the note. She knows exactly where I am. Now, we wait.
Linda arrived late, her blue dress catching the doorlight. She paused when she saw him at the bar, and for a moment neither moved. Then she walked to the booth, lit her candle, and spoke to the empty chair in a murmur only the table could hear.
James, there's a man at the bar who wrote me a letter. I think you would have liked him.
She did not look at Robert, but her back straightened as if she had made a choice.
Robert.
He turned, heart thudding. She gestured to the empty seat, her hand steady though her eyes were wet.
Don't just rush over. Wait for her to say it. This has to be her invitation.
Tonight. You may sit.
He crossed the room slowly, pulled out the chair, and for the first time in a decade, the empty seat held a living soul.
She let me in, just for tonight. Don't ask for more. Just be here.
Linda took a slow spoonful of soup and began to speak, her voice threading through the candle smoke. She pulled a worn photograph from her purse and laid it beside the candle.
James laughed when I burned the biscuits, said I was a better muse than baker. The accident took him at 3 in the morning. He never made it to the hospital.
Don't interrupt. Let her drain every drop of that grief.
she cried, and Robert slid a napkin across the table, letting silence say what words couldn't.
I've been ordering this soup every anniversary. I wanted to taste what you were tasting.
Linda's eyes widened, tears and surprise tangling. She studied him as if seeing him for the first time. In the service station, Carlos and a cook stood frozen, their chores forgotten. For a few hours, the booth wasn't a memorial. It was just a table for two. After the meal, Robert walked Linda to her car, the rain having softened to a mist that clung to their coats.
Thank you for tonight. But this can't happen again. I can't replace James.
I never wanted to replace him. I just wanted to understand.
She held his gaze, searching for a lie, but found only the same quiet patience he'd shown all evening.
Then you know why it hurts. Because for a few hours, I forgot he was gone.
I'll be here next year. Same bar, same night. In case you ever need a witness.
A flicker crossed her face. Not quite hope, but the ghost of a possibility she'd long forbidden herself.
Good night, Robert.
She drove into the thinning rain, and Robert stood alone on the wet cobblestone, the weight of her loss settling on his shoulders.
She said no, but she didn't tell me to stay away. That's enough.
1 year to the day, Robert pushed open the bistro door and stopped. At the corner booth, Linda waited, a small bouquet of wildflowers resting on the empty chair. Linda's hand brushed the petals as she looked up, her expression soft but certain.
I remembered what you said, that you'd be here.
She gestured to the seat across from her. No hesitation this time, only an invitation.
She's not just letting me sit. She wants me here. That chair isn't empty tonight. It's held.
He slid into the booth, and Carlos appeared with 2 bowls of soup, steam curling like a silent welcome.
The bouquet was the staff's doing. They said the chair shouldn't be empty anymore.
They're right. It shouldn't.
For the first time in over a decade, Linda Pierce ate her anniversary soup without tears, and when she looked across the table, she saw not just a stranger, but a friend who had kept his promise. They talked easily now about her garden, his struggling bookstore, the ordinary threads that stitch a life together.
I planted lilacs this year. James loved them. It felt like something I could finally do.
I nearly closed the shop this spring, but the idea of leaving felt heavier than staying.
Carlos materialized with a bottle of deep red wine, pouring without a word into glasses they hadn't requested.
He didn't ask. He just poured. Like this is a ritual he's been part of for years.
When the bowls were empty and the hour grew late, Robert reached for his wallet. Carlos was already there, shaking his head.
The meal is taken care of.
Taken care of? I don't understand.
Linda set her hand over Robert's, her smile knowing. The booth had become more than a table. It was a pact.
She knows. Whatever this is, she's known all along, and she's not going to explain.
As they passed the kitchen pass, Robert glimpsed Leo, watching through the steam, and turned to Linda.
Why would a restaurant give away a meal? This can't just be policy, can it?
This table has always been special. That's all I can say.
She touched his arm and walked into the night. Robert stared at the kitchen door, a decision hardening. The next afternoon, he returned to the lamplight in the dead hour between lunch and dinner. He found the owner scrubbing a steel counter, flour on his apron, eyes sharp as flint.
You are the one who's been sitting at that booth. I've watched you from the pass.
I need to understand. The free meal, the candle, the way you all protect her. Please, can you tell me?
Leo dried his hands slowly, his eyes weighing something heavier than a decade of secrets.
Come to the kitchen. It's time you knew the rest.
Leo leaned against the steel prep table and pointed at an old photograph pinned to the wall. A younger couple laughing in chef's whites.
That's James and Linda the day we opened. He built this place with his own hands, every recipe, every tile. The booth was his favorite spot to plan menus and make Linda laugh. When he died, we all swore we'd keep that table sacred.
Leo's voice tightened a fraction, as if tightening the strings of an old vow.
Every anniversary, we set the table, make his soup, and never charge her a dime. It's how we keep him alive.
Robert felt the weight of a decade of shared grief pressing from the walls, the floors, the very steam.
Then you came, the first stranger who didn't run away, who actually saw her.
Leo stepped closer, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that refused to break.
Don't break her. That seat isn't just a chair, it's everything he left behind.
Now I know. This isn't just a ritual. It's a promise made by a whole family, and they've trusted me with it.
The following Tuesday, Robert appeared with rolled-up sleeves and asked Leo if he could stack the pantry.
You don't have to earn your place with sweat, son.
Maybe not, but I'd like to anyway.
Over the months, his quiet presence became a fixture, reading in the corner booth on slow afternoons, polishing glassware when the rush hit. Linda began stopping by on Wednesdays for coffee. Not the anniversary, just because.
You never ask about the pact. Don't you want to know?
I already know enough. I just want to be here.
Something in her eyes softened. A crack in the fortress she'd built around the 15th. Carlos began saving him a slice of pie. Leo taught him to fold a napkin the staff way. Small gestures that said he belonged.
They're not just protecting her anymore. They've let me in, too. Don't let go of that.
Robert had arrived early, a small wrapped frame in his hands. He placed it on the empty plate, a restored photograph of James wearing his chef's whites. The image showed James mid-laugh, the same spark Linda carried in her own smile. Linda stopped at the edge of the booth, one hand pressed to her chest.
You went to the archives. You brought his smile back to this table.
She sat down slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the frame.
It's not just for tonight, is it? You are staying.
Every year. If you'll have me.
She reached across the table and took his hand, her wedding ring glinting beside his knuckles.
She's not just letting me witness. She wants me to stay. This is the yes.
In the candlelight, the empty chair held the photograph, and the seat across from it was hers no longer. As their spoons rested on empty bowls, Carlos and the entire staff stepped out from the kitchen and stood in a silent semicircle around the booth.
Everyone, there's a story you need to hear. This booth isn't just a table. It's the heart of everything we are.
The diners set down their glasses. The room fell into the kind of hush that only truth can command.
James Pierce founded this bistro. The booth was his favorite place, to plan menus, to make Linda laugh.
His voice broke, but he pushed on, recounting the decade of secret soup, unpaid meals, and the staff's unspoken promise to keep the chair warm.
Then Robert came, the first man she ever let sit in that chair. Not to replace James, but to keep his memory from being cold.
Linda pressed her hand to her lips, tears falling freely. Robert's own eyes shone as he looked at the people who had guarded her for so long. A single pair of hands began to clap, then two more, until the entire bistro filled with the sound of acceptance. The empty chair now held not just a photograph, but a promise that love doesn't disappear. It just takes a new seat at the table.
She's not alone anymore, and neither am I.
Carlos appeared one last time, placing a slip of cream paper beside the empty plate. On it, in elegant handwriting, "Never pay here."
It's a vow we made the night James didn't come home. As long as he's remembered at this table, no one pays.
You kept him alive all these years. I never had to ask.
Then I'll help keep it alive, too. Every year, as long as you'll have me.
Leo produced a dusty bottle of champagne that had waited a decade for this toast. He poured for the staff, for Linda, for Robert, foam spilling onto the white tablecloth like a baptism.
To James, to the table that never was empty.
They drank, and the empty chair held a photograph, a candle, and now a promise that would never be cold again.
I am not a guest here anymore. I am part of the pact.
1 year to the day, Robert and Linda walked into the lamplight side by side, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. The empty chair now held a small embroidered cushion, stitched with JP in thread the color of forget-me-nots.
I still can't fold a napkin the way Leo wants, but I am learning.
Carlos brought the soup without a word, the steam rising like an old friend. Robert lifted the serving ladle and filled Linda's bowl first, a new rhythm in an ancient ritual.
Thank you for not letting it grow cold.
The second plate is never cold anymore. That's the real pact.
They touched spoons in a quiet toast, the clink softer than champagne, but just as binding. Grief hadn't left. It had simply learned to sit beside love without demanding the only seat. And for the first time in 12 years, the booth felt full. Later that night, when the last guest had gone, Robert knelt by the booth's wooden frame and pressed a small brass plaque against the wall. It read, "For James, who started it all, and for those who kept the table warm." Linda traced the words with her fingertip, then rested her head against Robert's shoulder without a sound.
This isn't just a marker for James. It's a promise that this table will always mean something.
They stood in the quiet bistro long after the kitchen lights dimmed, a single candle still flickering on the empty booth. That flame would never go out. Leo had vowed, just as the seat would never be truly empty again. Linda slipped her hand into Robert's, and together they turned toward the door, leaving the candle to burn on. But before they left, Robert looked back at the booth, the 2 plates, the photograph, the plaque, and the chair that was never cold.
I once asked if I could take the empty seat. Now I am the one who keeps it from ever being cold.
And every year after, they walked into the lamplight together, and the second plate was never alone. Dawn broke over the lamplight, pale gold washing the empty street where the sign hung dark and silent. Inside, the corner booth waited. 2 plates, a single rose, and a candle that had burned through the night. On the wall, the old framed article still hung, James and Linda Pierce on opening day. Beside it, a newer photograph. In this new photo, Linda and Robert sat in the same booth, her hand in his, both smiling toward the camera. She still sets 2 plates. But now, the second plate is never cold. Grief had learned to sit at the same table, making room for what came after. The booth, once a memorial, had become a living place where love was honored and the future welcomed. Outside, the world stirred. But inside the lamplight, a promise remained. No empty chair would ever be cold again. The candle flickered once, then steadied, and the second plate was never alone.